and Northern Affairs Committee to order. And we'll start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. The committee is holding its first meeting on its study of food security in northern communities. To ensure an orderly meeting, participants may speak and listen in the official language of their choice. So this is really important because one of the stumbling blocks we have occasionally is the selection of the translation. So on the bottom center of your screen is a globe. You click on the globe, and there's three boxes. One says off, one says English, and one says French. So I'm now clicking the English box. I'll be speaking in English. For the most part, I have a 500-word French vocabulary, which I'm ashamed of. And every now and then I let loose. But so make sure that you have the language of your choice selected so that you'll hear the translation. And when you speak, it'll be properly translated, okay? And when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So having said that, with us today by video conference for the first hour are the following federal officials. John Fox and Matt Perry, Directors General from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Wayne Walsh, Director General from Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Northern Strategic Policy Branch. And Mary Trifonopoulos, the Senior Management at Indigenous Services, Healthy Living, Population Health and Wellness Division, First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. So we are going to begin with 6-minute statements from, first of all, the Directors General, John Fox and Matt Perry. So whoever would like to start, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you this morning from Ottawa, the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today as you resume your study on this important subject. I am pleased to be joined by John Fox, who is the Director General from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Programs Branch. I will speak briefly about Canada's new food policy and then describe Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's recent programs and activities which are helping to support food security, including in northern communities. In June 2019, following extensive consultations, the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food announced the first ever food policy for Canada, a roadmap for a healthier and more sustainable food system. It included a vision for all people in Canada to have access to sufficient amounts of safe, nutritious, and culturally diverse foods, and to support a food system that is resilient and innovative, sustains our environment, and supports our economy. Food security was indeed a critical issue that was identified during the food policy consultations, and it was highlighted when the food policy was launched. I would like to now outline the activities that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is undertaking to help address food security issues, including those in northern communities. The first is the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, which was first announced in Budget 2019 and formally launched the following summer. The fund is a 5-year, $50 million initiative. The objective of the fund is to strengthen food systems in Canada and to facilitate access to safe and nutritious food for at-risk populations. To date, the fund has supported some 13 projects in the territories involving more than $250,000. It has also approved 282 projects that identified Indigenous peoples as one of the beneficiaries of the project. In addition, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Science and Technology Branch is also working with Indigenous community stakeholders and partners in the North, including Arctic and subarctic regions. For example, a partnership is underway with the Joe Haven community in Nunavut, along with the Arctic Research Foundation, the National Research Council, and the Canadian Space Agency on a green energy-powered food production research unit. In addition to these measures, the government has also taken action to address the significant challenges relating to food security that have arisen during the pandemic. In April 2020, the government announced up to $100 million in funding through the Emergency Food Security Fund for Canadian food banks and other national food rescue organizations to help improve access to food for people experiencing food insecurity in Canada due to the pandemic. To date, the Emergency Food Security Fund has provided up to $3.2 million in funding to 90 recipients in the territories. It has also provided $17.7 million in funding to 820 recipients supporting Indigenous peoples. An additional $100 million in funding for the Emergency Food Security Fund was announced by the Prime Minister in October. In addition, there is the Surplus Food Rescue Program, which was a $50 million initiative to help support Canada's food system, food processors and food producers, as well as distributors, to help ensure food availability for all Canadians. Funding was used to help manage and redirect existing food surpluses to organizations addressing food insecurity and to ensure that these surplus products were not wasted. The Surplus Food Rescue Program has provided support to 94 recipients in the territories. In addition, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada officials have been meeting regularly with officials from other federal departments and agencies, provinces and territories, industry, civil society, and Indigenous partners throughout the pandemic to better understand regional and local challenges and to collectively address food security issues. In closing, Mr. Chair, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada will continue to implement the programs and activities announced last year as part of the food policy, as well as the emergency measures announced during the pandemic to strengthen food systems in Canada in keeping with the food policy vision and to address urgent needs across the country, including those in northern communities. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Perry. And even below the 6-minute mark, you're always appreciated. And next, for 6 minutes, we have the Director General now from Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Wayne Walsh. Mr. Walsh, 6 minutes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Algonquin people here in lovely downtown Gatineau. I want to thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you about the important work being done within Northern Affairs on food security in the North and to provide you with an update since our last appearance on this study in February of this year. Since the onset of the pandemic, the department has been closely monitoring Northern supply chains and the impacts of food access in the North. During the first weeks of the pandemic, the department, in collaboration with Transport Canada, worked with Northern Airlines, retailers, suppliers to monitor the impacts of pandemic closures and lock down the restrictions on the supply chain. Maintaining this supply chain is critical not only for the transport of goods, but also other goods and essential services. The department engaged with partners to avoid disruptions in the supply chain and continue to monitor closely to ensure that critical access is maintained. To ensure that families have access to nutritious food and to help offset the financial burden caused by COVID-19, the government announced a one-time financial injection of $25 million to the Nutrition North Canada retail subsidy in April. Subsidy rates have been increased on basic and essential goods across all 116 eligible communities, effective May 1st, 2020. In addition, Nutrition North Canada expanded the eligibility list to include additional items such as hand sanitizers and soap. These additional investments have had a positive impact on prices in the North, and the eligible communities are generally experiencing significant price reductions for many good items. For example, the price of a 10-kilogram bag of flour in Iqaluit dropped from $21.49 to $11.49, which represents a 47% price reduction, bringing it in line with the shelf price of flour in the South. In April, Nutrition North Canada also launched a new harvester support grant, an $8 million per year initiative to support hunting, harvesting, and food sharing in isolated northern communities. Grant agreements have been signed with recipient land claims, self-government, and Indigenous organizations. It has been designed to be Indigenous-led with a recognition that harvesting needs and practices should be driven by communities themselves. The launch of the Harvester Support Grant serves as an important milestone in response to recommendations from North.
This is the interpreter speaking. Could we please ask the guest to slow down? Thank you.
An important step forward in addressing food security in the North. Beyond subsidizing market food, and a critical step in recognizing the role of rights, tradition, and cultural practices in sustaining isolated Indigenous communities. Relationships established with recipient organizations of the Harvesters Support Grant have been instrumental in understanding the unique challenges communities are experiencing during this pandemic and for providing additional support. Partners have commented that the deployment of the Harvester Support Grant has provided additional support to communities to increase access to traditional food during this challenging time. For example, one of the recipient groups in Northern Ontario purchased 23 community freezers for 18 isolated communities to store hunted and harvested traditional country food. During the pandemic, the grant has also provided critical support to the migration of community members to the land and out of the community where they are isolated while engaging in traditional harvesting activities. Nutrition North Canada has also partnered Harvester Support Grant recipients to other federal funding opportunities to improve food access during the pandemic. For example, Nutrition North Canada worked closely with colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to help distribute surplus food through the Surplus Food Rescue Program. All 3 territories and regions across the provincial norths received deliveries of surplus food, including frozen fish and meat products. Collaboration with federal partners has been essential in providing support to Northern and Indigenous partners throughout this pandemic. And the department thanks our colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada for their collaborative opportunities. The pandemic measures have been effective for the most part. However, the outbreak has also highlighted the degree of need in Northern isolated communities and the critical link between food security and poverty. Nutrition North Canada has recognized this and is working to address gaps highlighted by the pandemic to implement permanent improvements. Important steps have been made during this difficult time to support isolated northern communities in accessing food and the unique challenging circumstances of communities in the North. The department is committed to continuing to work with Northerners and Indigenous partners to work together on long-term solutions and opportunities to strengthen local food systems and improve food security in the North. With that, I'd like to thank you, and I welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. And Ms. Trifonopoulos, as I said, is here to answer questions. She will make an opening statement, so that will enable us to hopefully get a full round of questioning in, beginning for 6 minutes with Mr. Vidal. Gary, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My beginning question is going to be about Nutrition North, specifically in northern Saskatchewan, and I'm going to open it up to any of the witnesses that feel they have the data or the ability to answer the question. There's been, some serious concerns raised around the Nutrition North program, but where I want to focus is that in a riding like mine in northern Saskatchewan, there's specifically 3 communities that are actually in northern Saskatchewan, but they're not north of 60. So there's kind of a different relationship there to some of the programs and whatnot. And the most recent data on your website about the contributions in both dollars and weight of food subsidized in those communities is from 2018. So my question is simply, what has changed since 2018 in the context of northern Saskatchewan, specifically in those communities that are south of 60? What new investments, what changes have been made, and is there some measurable outcomes that you could outline for me that would identify progress and improvements in those outcomes?
Yeah, so our 2019 data should be posted on the departmental website fairly soon. The northern Saskatchewan communities that are eligible for Nutrition North would have benefited from the COVID, the $25 million that was injected into the program dating back effective May 2021. So that's the one change. And also we do have recipient organizations in Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan, that are taking advantage of the Harvest to Support grant.
So can you speak at all to any kind of outcomes or any results of some of the investments that have been made?
When it comes to the Harvest to Support grant, I think it's still fairly early days. The money has just started to roll out in April, and so we will be collecting data from our recipient organizations as they go along. It is a 5-year project. In terms of the retail subsidy, we do track expenditures. And as I mentioned, I don't have those figures in front of me right now, but we will be able to post those reports as we do frequently on the 2019 figures.
All right, we'll watch for those, and thank you. Could you speak specifically about the impact of the pandemic or what it's had on, specifically on the Nutrition North program and its ability to ensure the communities and I use the Saskatchewan example as these fly-in communities that are south of 60, so to speak, across the country. What has the impact of the pandemic been on the programs like Nutrition North to serve those communities, make sure they have access to affordable food?
Well, what we found, generally speaking, is an uptake by community members on the program. The data that we've been collecting so far seems to indicate an increase in the shipment of food throughout the Nutrition North Canada area. And that is probably as a result of a number of factors. That the one being the increased subsidy on those essential items, bringing those prices quite down to make them even more affordable, I think has had an impact. But there's also been other measures taken by provincial, territorial, and federal governments that has, for example, with the introduction of the CERB benefit, we did notice that also had a correlation on people buying more food through the Nutrition North program. And then also even NTI and the government of Nunavut, for example, in its most recent response to the pandemic in Arviat and Rankin Inlet, have offered food baskets. Well, that has also had an impact on the overall amount of food bought, and therefore impact on the NNC program. So
maybe could you very specifically maybe tell me how you measure success of a program like this? My understanding is that there's been significant dollars spent, but food insecurity is actually rising in many of these communities still. So what is it actually that we're using to measure success and outcomes?
So two things. One is we have the Northern Food Basket that we track. The overall price of that food basket, it's a representative sample. And then we track the overall price and to make sure that the prices are maintained or lowered over time. So that's one of the big metrics. And then the second is that we follow quite closely is on the actual amount of food that is shipped in the north. So that also gives us an indication of uptake on the program.
Thanks very much. That brings us to time for our next question, set of questions coming from Marcus Pawlowski. 6 minutes, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to ask about greenhouses. So I'm a doctor. I've spent a couple of years working in northern Indigenous communities. There's certainly a lot of non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. And as a result of that, a lot of heart problems, strokes, blindness, amputations. And I think to some extent, it all starts out with diet. I know, having lived a few years in those communities, that it's fairly cheap to buy chips and pop. It's a lot more difficult to buy green vegetables. And even as a doctor who's probably the wealthiest person in the community, I found it very expensive. I know shipping stuff up north is expensive, but how about growing it up north? I know there have been some initiatives here in northwestern Ontario to start greenhouses in Indigenous communities. I recently visited a new facility that was growing marijuana, medical marijuana here in Thunder Bay. It was all hydroponics. They used no natural light. It was all artificial light. I asked about the amount of energy it would take to run it. They said not that much. It seemed like it was something that could be done in fly-in communities, more northern communities. What have we done specifically to try to encourage the development of greenhouses? Because this would certainly seem to me a good way of improving the diet in a lot of northern communities, and as a result of that improved diet, improve people's health. Maybe Mr. Perry, but I don't know if others may want to respond as well.
Thank you for the question. I might turn to my colleague, Mr. Fox, on this point. I would also note, Mr. Chair, that there is another program that's not run by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada called the Northern Isolated Community Infrastructure Fund that Canor operates, which likely provides support in this area. But John, did you have anything to add?
And you referred to it, Matt, in your opening remarks. There is a project that our science and technology branch is working on with NRCan and others on controlled growth chambers that are scalable for northern communities. It's still at the experimental stage. I actually had an opportunity to visit it in Kemptville. And the only other thing I would add is that under the local infrastructure fund, we do provide up to $250,000 for infrastructure projects, which were intended to cover a gambit of activities that communities may want to explore. They could include greenhouses, but in a lot of cases, those communities are interested in trying out community gardens with root crops that can be grown in the ground over the short growing season in the north. So there is some work being done around expanding growth potential in northern isolated communities.
It would certainly seem to me that would be an option for us that would be worth exploring. Is there no other source within the Indigenous stream for funding these kind of projects? If a community was specifically interested in pursuing this, what, if any, options would they have?
So our programs don't have a particular Indigenous stream, but we do partner with Indigenous communities in the North, either through our mainstream innovation programming, but also, as I said, through the local infrastructure fund. But you might want to ask either our Indigenous services colleague or our CINA colleague if there are specific Indigenous programs that might address that need.
So if I may, I'll jump in here. I think the program that Mr. Perry identified from Canor is certainly one that's probably the most front and center. One of the things that we've had a lot of discussions with Indigenous communities is the utilization of the Harvester Support Grant, whether that can be expanded to include things like food production and greenhouses. So I think those discussions are ongoing. And then we do also have, some climate change and green energy programs here within the department where communities have taken advantage of to help, power and provide that supply to greenhouses. But it's very much on a community by community, and there's nothing that's systematic at this point, but it's certainly something that has garnered increasing attention and interest.
A number of months ago, I was talking to Alvin Fiddler, and who's the Grand Chief of INAN, and he was telling me that as a kid, his parents used to grow potatoes and turnips in the garden, and they would have enough potatoes and turnips. His father dug a hole in the ground or something. It was kind of like what's the name of that? But I know the Ukrainian community did the same thing, but they had potatoes and turnips for year round. What if any investments have we made in terms of supporting and educating populations in those isolated communities to grow their own food, their own vegetables that they could use in the winter?
We're at 6 minutes right there. So just a quick answer. We might pick it up later. Go ahead.
I'll defer to Mary on the education side of things.
Yes, good morning. Certainly, Indigenous Service Canada provides funding for community-based health programs in First Nations and Inuit communities, including in the North. And these programs and services promote health eating and food skills. And often, communities do want to do community gardens and household gardens and learn more about those things. And as well as improve access to healthy foods. So that does definitely come up in the programming, which, has multiple objectives.
We're way over. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
6 minutes now. Madame Bérubé, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question goes to Mr. Walsh. You talked about challenges posed by the pandemic and additional support. In our community in Inwajuak, there's a project that carries out garden projects, and this is a hydroponic firm that allows people to harvest vegetables throughout the year. Most of their produce would go to Nunavik, and excesses will be sold in their local stores. Such projects, in your opinion, could receive assistance in other communities in the North?
Yeah, at this point, there are pockets of funding and there are pockets of resources that would go towards projects such as the one you've indicated in Nunavik. A lot of them are ad hoc, seem to be on a case by case, and as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing that's unfortunately right now that's systematic in terms of a program set aside. So that's why we have these ongoing discussions and through our engagements, and we try to steer people in the right directions. But I think it is certainly something that we've increasingly been looking at. And as I mentioned earlier, the Harvester Support Grant, people are asking, could we repurpose some of that money for things like hydroponics or community gardens. So it's there's a growing interest in the communities for this type of investment.
Vous avez parlé aussi il y a de l'insécurité.
You also talked about food insecurity that affects both men and women the same way in the north of Canada. Why or why not is there this situation?
If I understand your question correctly, I would actually argue that food insecurity in the north probably affects women more than men. They tend to be the matriarch of the household, and when food insecurity has a huge impact on the households, and so without having any tangible data in front of me for you today, I would say generally like children and women bear the brunt of food insecurity in the north, and I would say that's probably the case everywhere.
Aussi, j'aimerais vous parler.
In my region, Abbey James, it's very difficult to send food by air or by railway or even by boat. So how do you plan to send food to regions like mine, which have such difficulties?
Yeah, I mean, that is essentially the crux of the problem. I mean, the communities that we're talking about, whether they're in the high north or in the provincial norths, are isolated, and food and other supplies need to be flown in, and that has a huge impact on the cost, but it can also have a huge impact on the quality of the product in some cases. And so the Nutrition North Canada, the retail subsidy program, I think at its heart aims to it targets those nutritious and perishable foods that need to be flown in order to reduce the price for those people who live in the northern communities. And that's essentially the fundamental challenge. But whenever you need to transport food any distances, it's going to be more expensive, and that's why increasingly communities are looking at local food production in order to offset some of that. So when we're looking at food systems and addressing food insecurity, I think we need to look at a whole host of different opportunities and a whole host of different solutions in order to address the issue.
Quand vous parlez de...
When you talk about, or rather, have you done any comparisons between Canada and other countries when it comes to food insecurity?
Oh, we have not, but I'm pretty sure that if I recall correctly, the Food Secure Canada would have done some work in that domain, and there's some other academics in Canada that would have looked at food insecurity, Canadian versus international, and certainly a lot has been done to study the issue between southern and northern Canada. So
10 seconds.
Quels sont les facteurs qui
What factors could improve the process when it comes to Nutrition North, in your opinion?
Over 6 minutes.
Well, I would say that the number one cause of food insecurity is poverty. So if poverty was addressed, then food security would be addressed, and it wouldn't be a Nutrition North issue.
Thanks very much, Mr. Walsh, Madam Berube. Ms. Blaney, it's your turn now for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses so much for your testimony today. If I could start with Mr. Perry first, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that right now your department has, I think, 182 projects directly partnered with Indigenous communities. I'm just wondering, in your process of doing these projects, what is the analysis around best practices, and how is that sort of information shared with other communities that may have similar challenges?
Thank you for the question. I might turn to John Fox, my colleague who is in the programs branch, to speak to those issues.
Yeah, and I'm just I'm wondering if the member is looking specifically at the local food infrastructure projects that we've been doing in Indigenous communities, or in the emergency food response as a result of COVID, because
well, both are very important.
Slightly different in both of those cases.
I mean, neither is important, but the first one I have more interest in.
In the local food infrastructure program.
That's right.
So that is a purely an application-based program. We send out the word as broadly as we can, including to members of Parliament, to invite applications to come in. They're community-based, so there's a broad suite of potential eligible applicants. They include even municipal governments or governmental agencies, Indigenous organizations, economic development corporations,
so there's
but it's
no
aimed
process.
at the not-for-profits.
Yeah, so there's no process where best practices, because I find this is a gap as a person who worked in the nonprofit sector for many years and worked in Indigenous communities. One of the things that I found very concerning is that when things worked well, there was nothing shared broadly so that people could look at those programs, those projects, and look at implementing them. So I'm just to clarify, there's no system of sharing best practices or successful programs.
The program has only been open for about 14 months, so it's a little early days to be able to determine where those best practices might lie.
So in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, I know that your partner or departments allowed more flexibility to use funding based on what community needs there were. I know I heard from some communities in my riding about starting community gardens, also heard about food security projects like providing hampers and getting people back out onto the land. I'm just wondering, has this made any of the departments reevaluate your process in programming, having to address these issues in a new way? And both departments.
So I'll go first, I guess. I would just say simply yes. But it was something that we were starting to do already through our engagement with our Indigenous partners. We were being increasingly asked to look at lots of different options other than just the retail subsidy to address food security. And so I think the introduction of the Harvester Support Grant was the first step towards that. And discussions are ongoing on other possibilities moving forward.
The only thing I could add is that, at least in terms of the emergency COVID responses along food, the focus of that response has been specifically food, but we've been pretty flexible in terms of how that food assistance could be distributed. In some cases in northern communities, it was found that distributing gift cards to individual families was the best way to get them to be able to purchase their own food needs through the retail operations. In other cases, as you notice, it was hampers. But the entire focus of the first 100 million and the second 100 million that the Prime Minister announced is strictly on emergency food assistance. And so that money hasn't been used to do more long-term work around capacity building and food systems.
So, Mr. Walsh, if I could come back to you, I find this on the land initiatives very interesting. I really appreciated the information you gave us about communities coming together and buying a lot of freezers to store food. But I know that when we look at health, and I appreciate what Mr. Pawlowski was talking about earlier about people having healthy food, the affordability of more healthy food and the challenges. But especially when we talk about Indigenous communities, I'm wondering if there's been any reflection on the ability for people to harvest off the land and really start to meet the gap of those healthy choices in food because of their traditional knowledge. So I'm just wondering if that's come together and if there's any sort of feedback on that, and if there in the long term any reflection on measuring health outcomes based on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And the reality is the traditions and approaches and cultural practices will vary from region to region and community to community. And so we designed the Harvester Support Grant to be as flexible and as possible so that the communities can target their funding accordingly. And what we've been finding is that some communities have been looking at it as a part of a cultural revitalization, mentoring or matching elders with youth to go out on the land and do that. So the program is still really young. I mean, money just started flowing in April. There are reporting requirements back from the communities, and we anticipate that we will see different metrics and different data coming because of the different communities will take different approaches. So it'll be interesting to see what the lessons learned on that. But I think what's really important is that at the end of the day, it's what matters in the community and not like we didn't design it in Ottawa. It really was designed for Northerners by Northerners. So that's going to be a bit of a balance. In terms of the health outcomes, I'll defer to Mary from the First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. But I will also say that one of the concerns going forward that we'll have to keep an eye on, and certainly,
I'm sorry, we're way over time on the answer. I apologize for that, and my microphone switch wouldn't come in to interrupt, so every now and then technical glitches happen. I'm sorry. We go now to our next round of questioning, and perhaps you can complete that later on. But right now we have Mr. Melillo, and this is the 5-minute round. Eric, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to go back to Mr. Walsh, and I'd like to pick up on something that my colleague, Mr. Vidal, was asking, and in terms of how we measure success of Nutrition North and of these programs. And Mr. Walsh, you mentioned tracking the cost of the food basket, tracking the amount of food in the North, which are obviously very important aspects of this. But I do think overall that, of course, the goal that we should be tracking is food security for those in the North. And I think that if that is not our primary focus with these goals, then perhaps we're missing the mark a bit, and perhaps there is a bit of a lack of a focus on building capacity in Northern communities. So I'd like to ask what sort of mechanisms are you using to monitor food insecurity across the North, and in order to respond to that issue more directly?
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think the reality is food security is a complex issue that requires lots of partners and to collaborate and come together with solutions. Nutrition North Canada is a retail subsidy. It's one aspect in what we think requires a suite of actions. So in and of itself, Nutrition North is never going to solve food security. That's why we've introduced things like the Harvester Support Grant. That's why we're working with our federal colleagues at Canor on the community innovation stuff, with our colleagues over at AgCan on the national food policy, and obviously with our Indigenous partners. We are, like I mentioned before as well, I think the number one cause of food insecurity in the North and in Canada, frankly, is poverty. And so we need to engage with other partners in order to address that core issue. And so I think, taken as a whole, is the approach that we need to take. Now, in terms of providing data as a program, we've got our metrics and we follow our Treasury Board reporting requirements on the program itself. But certainly we do keep an eye on think tanks and other agencies nationally who track food insecurity rates in the North and in Canada.
Thank you. And I do agree with a lot of what you just said, particularly in terms of poverty being a real issue. And that I think it shows why we need to do more, I think, to increase economic activity, create more opportunities for jobs and more opportunities for prosperity across the North. Unfortunately, over the past few years, I think that this government, frankly, has opposed many opportunities for development in the North. So I'm wondering if you could speak more to a plan to develop the North and to create some more opportunities, so that, like you said, we can have a more wholesome approach to addressing this issue.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. We launched in 2019. The government announced the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. It's a co-developed policy approach between the government of Canada and Northerners to map out a roadmap for sustainable social and economic development in the north between now and 2030. And so the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework has 8 goals and multiple objectives, and we are now in the process of co-implementing that framework with our partners, which includes territorial and provincial governments as well as Indigenous governments, to make progress against that framework. And the framework looks at things like, some foundational infrastructure requirements. It looks at things like economic development, education, attainment levels, health, reduction of poverty, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a framework in place, a comprehensive framework in place that's been developed with our partners, and that's what's really guiding our work right now to advance the North and those goals and objectives in the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework.
Just 10 seconds left, Eric.
I'll give that time back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And we go next to Mr. Batiste. Time 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, I was lucky enough about 18 years ago to be able to go to Iqaluit myself. And as part of Assembly First Nations Youth Council, there was a meeting with provincial and territorial agreements and agencies. And I got a chance to speak to some of the people around the importance of harvesting and Indigenous harvesting. And as a Mi'kmaq person myself, I know how that harvesting isn't just about food. It's about a cultural practice. It's about transition of knowledge. So my question is around the Harvester Support Grant. And I know it's quite new in its launch, but I'm wondering if you can provide any insight into how the program is being received by eligible communities, and if you see any possibilities of expanding the program, if it's successful, and just generally the health of the stocks of the traditionally hunted or fished animal life out there, and just get a sense of, is this program working?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I'm glad you asked it because it will enable me to finish an earlier answer where I ran a little over. So it's been received very, very well in the communities. Some of our recipients have called it a game changer for them. And it's a game changer not only because of the things that it accomplishes, as you mentioned, in terms of cultural reappropriation, mentorship between elders and youth. It has, they're telling us it has some real impacts on language revitalization, passing traditional information on. So that's the first answer. The second one is, are we looking at expansion? We were being asked to expand it as soon as we announced it. They said, this is great, we could use more. So we're on conversations with our partners on this and a whole suite of other food security solutions. And then the final one is on access to traditional food or traditional animals, to the wildlife itself. And this is something that I was alluding to earlier, we're going to have to keep an eye on, and that is the effects of climate change is having a tremendous impact on caribou herds, on fish stocks, on migration patterns. And so it's great to have a program like this, but we'll need to work very closely with our colleagues on the environmental side and territorial and provincial governments, because climate change does have a potential to have a significant impact on the whole program and the whole exercise of cultural harvesting.
I've heard some of the difficulties around caribou, and certainly the stocks are, there's been challenges around that. Can you talk to me about some of the other traditional harvesting practices, whether they be fishing, what are some of the things that the Inuit are taking part in that we could expand on? Because maybe the biggest thing is we want the stocks to be healthy and the survival of the species, regardless of what it is. So I'm wondering if there's any healthy stocks out there of traditionally harvested foods that we might be able to focus on and expand on.
Yeah, I believe that you'll have officials from the government of Nunavut in the next hour. They might actually better be placed to be more specific on that question. Certainly fishing has been seen as a huge opportunity in the north. It's probably been underdeveloped compared to other areas of Canada. And then I think another area of concern is invasive species. So there's species of animals that are coming north that didn't exist before, and what kind of impact that might have.
Okay, I guess my last question, if I have any question, is about the Indigenous Community Support Fund. Can you provide some clarity as to how individual communities across the North are utilizing this funding to ensure they meet the needs of community members as it relates to food security? And that's for any of the witnesses, really.
A half a minute.
I think, Mary, that's an ISC program, right?
Yes, it is. Not specifically, because the Indigenous Community Support Fund is supporting a broad range of needs to help communities adapt to the COVID crisis. But food security is definitely one of the activities that communities are, and that we're hearing from our partners, they are addressing through this in terms of additional food relief or delivering food hampers, because a lot of activities that normally happen in the communities, they've had to pivot to other modes of getting food to folks. So it's definitely being used in that way as part of a broad range of measures.
Thanks very much. We're going to conclude with the 2.5 minute segments with Madame Bérubé and Miss Blaney, which will take us to time. So Madame Bérubé, 2.5 minutes, please go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you. My question goes to Madame Triponolo-Plus. When we talk about the importance of traditional foods or local food for physical and mental health, according to you, what is the government doing to increase access to country foods in the North?
Probably the question might be, I don't know to which of my colleagues it might be best directed. Through Indigenous Services Canada, we do mostly support communities in designing their activities and services towards improving healthy eating. And often this does include increasing access to healthy store-bought food and traditional food. So, it could be improving knowledge around the use and the preparation. Inviting elders are often a very critical part of the activities that communities want to have. There are, some on-the-land activities that are supported where multiple objectives are often met. Mental wellness, often paired with learning how to hunt and fish. So the access is improved in that way. Yeah, I don't know if any of my other colleagues might have contributions.
I think that was pretty comprehensive. The only, in terms of programs itself, obviously the Harvester Support Grant is there.
1 more minute.
Aussi, quand on parle de recommandations qui ont eu lieu en 2011,
when we talk about recommendations that were made in 2011 from the Standing Committee on Northern Affairs and Development of the North, what measures have been taken by the government to follow up on those recommendations that we made in 2011?
I think what I'll do is if the chair would allow, is I'd be happy to provide a written response to that, because it is a fairly comprehensive response to those recommendations.
That is absolutely fine, and that brings us to time. Thanks very much. Thanks for providing that. And as to all witnesses, anything that's missing, please submit written material. Ms. Blaney, 2.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. So if I can come back and finish off my question with Ms. Trifonopoulos, if you could just talk about the health outcomes. I was asking earlier about health and well-being and harvesting off the land, and I'm just wondering how are health outcomes measured, and how do you work with the communities to make sure that that's something that's carefully monitored and shared with the community?
It's a very important question. What impact, do the various services and programs have? I think one of the promising things is supporting more and more Indigenous-led data collection through things like the First Nations Regional Health Survey. Inuit are working on the Comprehensive Inuit Health Survey. I think it's just in the beginning stages. And included in these surveys are measures on a variety of social and health outcomes. In terms of some of the other impacts, we measure in the short term things that look promising towards improved health, whether it's increased knowledge and skills gained. So it depends on the service being provided, to what extent. Communities, we are at the same time trying to minimize reporting and encourage a lot of flexibility in the funds. So I think really those broader Indigenous-led data initiatives are where the most promise is in collecting those medium to longer term health outcomes.
Thank you. My next question is just how do we compare on the land initiatives to Nutrition North? Is it something that we need to correlate more together, or how? I'm just wondering, because I think when people are out on the land gathering healthy food and bringing it home, how does it work with Nutrition North, and is there one that is more effective?
So that's a great question, and I think one of the things we'll be looking at long term is the impact that harvesting has on the need to buy food in a store. And so if, the assumption is if we are successful through the Harvester Support Grant, there will be less reliance on store-bought food for similar items, and that we should actually see a decrease in sales in those items from the retail because they're being supplemented by harvesting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's it.
We're pretty much out of time, and I want to thank our witnesses so much. Once again, there's so much detail that anything that needs to be supplemented can certainly be done by written testimony, which you can send in to us if you feel, or if any of our members of the committee need more information on any of those subjects. But to keep us on time, and we have three other witnesses in the next panel, we're going to suspend now. Once again, thanks so much to our witnesses. We are suspended for about 3 minutes to set up our next panel. as we continue our study of food security in northern communities. And for our panelists, just a reminder that you should be look to the bottom center of your screen. There's a globe there, and clicking on that globe, you'll be able to select either English or French. If you don't, you may not get translation. So the language of your choice that you're going to speak in and listen back to in, select that in that globe, and that is usually the one little stumbling block that we have to encounter as we organize our meetings. So with that being said, with us today by video conference for the second hour are the following witnesses. Lindsay Turner is Director of Poverty Reduction, Family Services of the Government of Nunavut. Tracy St. Denis, Assistant Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Industry, Tourism, and Investment of the Government of the Northwest Territories. And Ranj Pillai, the Minister of Energy, Mines, and Resources of the Yukon Government. Welcome to all three. I invite the witnesses to make their opening statements of up to 6 minutes. Lindsay Turner, could you begin now for 6 minutes?
Ulukut, Kuyanami, Mr. Chair, for today's invitation to speak to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs about food security in Nunavut. As mentioned, my name is Lindsay. I am the mother of 3 young boys, and I have lived in Iqaluit, Nunavut since 2011. And I have been filling the role of the Director of Poverty Reduction since 2015, as well as in partnership with Nunavut Tungavik, the role of co-chair of the Nunavut Food Security Coalition. According to the 2017-18 Canadian Community Health Survey, 79% of Nunavut's children live in food insecure households, and 57% of households in the territory are food insecure. The Nunavut Food Security Action Plan speaks to how Nunavummiut have a long-standing, intricate knowledge of how to obtain, store, prepare, and consume country food. Makimanik 2, Nunavut's shared approach to poverty reduction, speaks to how in traditional Inuit society, there was well-established systems of parents and grandparents passing knowledge along to children. However, today much of this has been broken as the result of federal colonial policies from the 1950s and 60s, including relocation to communities, relocation to the high Arctic, residential schools, tuberculosis interventions, and sled dog killings. As a result, today there is a lot of concern that country food skills are not being passed to younger generations, combined with that now similar skills related to store-bought food are not being acquired. Food insecurity in Nunavut is complex, and the required solutions and supports are wide-ranging, from hunting and harvesting supports and infrastructure to fisheries and marine infrastructure, to airport and cargo infrastructure, to mental health and addictions, to housing, to local workforce development, to a strengthened not-for-profit sector, to community food infrastructure, to nutrition, and to financial life and food skills. However, today I will focus my remarks on just a few of these, on the importance of country food, the importance of sharing food, community food infrastructure gaps that exist in Nunavut, and current goals to build the capacity of community food organizations. In 2019, the Kikitani Inuit Association published Food Sovereignty and Harvesting and called for a shift in thinking about food security to food sovereignty and empowering Inuit to feed their own communities and control their food systems and supply. Country food is not only nutritious, but plays a critical cultural and healing role in Nunavut communities. The support of young hunter mentorship programs, increased resources for hunter and trapper organizations.
This is the interpreter speaking again. If you could please slow down, it would help for interpretation.
Supplies, and skill building opportunities and tools to learn and to be able to repair skidoos and build kamutiks are all ways that access to country food can be improved. The Nunavut Food Security Action Plan highlights the critical role community-based programs play in supporting food sharing and in strengthening connections with communities, as well as contributing to the nutritional needs of vulnerable populations such as children, single parents, and elders. Indeed, there is a rich diversity of community-based programming and resources that has been developed within Nunavut. However, many of our conversations with community food organizations and community members have emphasized the fragile nature of these operations. Many struggle to access the various applications for funding, to even find space in which to run their programs, and their initiatives are ad hoc and come and go with the consistency of staff and community member availability to provide the on-the-ground coordination. The vision of the Nunavut Food Security Coalition is to foster the development and growth of community food organizations that are able to sustain more comprehensive, innovative, culturally appropriate, and sustainable food system and life skill projects. To realize this, there is a need for more startup supports, capacity strengthening opportunities, multi-year and core funding, and access to reliable community social infrastructure. I would also like to share how the design of many federal programs intended to address food insecurity in the North have made it difficult, if not impossible, for Nunavut communities to access funding for their priority needs. Recent changes to the Nutrition North Canada program, new initiatives announced by Agriculture Canada under the National Food Policy, and recent COVID-19 emergency food security investments have all been welcomed in Nunavut. However, all of these programs could have been designed and delivered in ways that could have had greater and more sustainable impact in Nunavut and better meet Nunavut's priorities. Cost matching criteria, language and internet barriers, eligible and ineligible costs, and contributions and maximum funding levels that do not take into account either the high costs of the North or the capacity and infrastructure deficits of the North are but some examples of the challenges faced. Programs designed within Nunavut context could go a long way to supporting food sovereignty in Nunavut's communities. There is more recently also concern that the funding that has been made available this past year to meet the urgency of COVID-19 will not be sustained to meet what has been a long-standing urgency of unacceptable food insecurity levels in Nunavut. In closing, I would like to share with you an excerpt from Makimanik II's definition of poverty in Nunavut. Many Inuit today have successfully bridged two worlds, life on the land and life in the settlements, but many others have not. Those who have not require more support to meet their basic needs, to acquire the knowledge and skills to live either a traditional or a modern way of life or a mix of both, and to participate fully and take leadership in the decisions that affect their lives. Kuyanemi, Mr. Chair. Taima.
Thank you very much.
A request again on the part of the interpreters, if guests could please be asked to slow down. We don't have their text and it's very difficult to do our work.
Yeah, I'll just repeat that. We need slow and clear, but please hurry up because you only have 6 minutes. That's our dilemma. I apologize for that. So next we have the Assistant Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Industry, Tourism, and Investment of the Government of the Northwest Territories, Tracy St. Dennis. Tracy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try and be quick but clear. Thank you and good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to present the Northwest Territories' position on this important matter. I'm pleased to be speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Yellowknife Dene, Chief Dry Geese Territory. The Government of the Northwest Territories is keenly aware of the importance of food security, especially with the pandemic making it more of a serious issue around the world. In the Northwest Territories, we have numerous small communities with issues of geography, transportation, and access. During these challenging times, these vulnerable populations critically need our assistance with health, safety, and security. Our government's mandate is to increase food security through locally produced, harvested, and affordable food. Increased local food production can support the GNWT's goal to improve food security across the territory. Our government is focused on practical solutions to increasing food security through several priority projects. These include a plan to review and amend a regulatory framework to remove barriers that impede NWT residents from developing food production businesses, implementing a meat inspection regulatory framework for locally produced and sold products, specifically meat products, working to strengthen the territorial support for Indigenous governments to develop and deliver culturally appropriate harvester support programs, including a harvester mentorship program, reviewing our Northern Food Development Program to ensure territorial food security supports are provided for greenhouses and community gardens, committing to working with Indigenous and community governments to recommend improvements to the Nutrition North program, and finally, planning the construction of a Canadian Food Inspection Agency approved fish plant in Hay River that will give our local fishers, who are largely Indigenous, more autonomy over their sector. This will shift the commercial fishers from being price takers to being price setters with the Northwest Territories trout, whitefish, pickerel, our premium water, and subarctic products. The GNWT recognizes that a great deal of interjurisdictional cooperation is necessary to achieve food security throughout the territory. Food insecurity, when experienced, touches every aspect of people's lives, particularly affecting health and education outcomes. To mitigate these issues, we've continued partnerships with Indigenous governments and the federal government to identify potential pathways to move forward collaboratively. One of the ways we are doing this is working closely with Second Harvest and Food Banks Canada to connect them directly with Indigenous governments and organizations delivering food charity in the NWT. We've also worked with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. When meat shortages were first identified as a concern by grocers early in the lockdown, we were extremely appreciative of the fast action undertaken by the federal government to negotiate and sign an MOU for the temporary ministerial exemption process to allow for interprovincial trade of meat and poultry products from establishments that are not federally licensed. The NWT understands the pressure and responsibility placed on the federal government over the past several months. The vulnerabilities exposed by lockdowns have resulted in devastation for cities across Canada, but has also stimulated opportunities for innovative approaches. The North has always had innovative solutions to issues by necessity. Supporting and sustaining communities separated by distance and culture has created unique partnerships and a dependence on one another to help the territory thrive as a whole. As we review the potential options for developing solutions to gaps in food security, we know this can only be accomplished with partnerships at the community, territorial, and federal levels. The federal government's support for vulnerable populations and food security throughout the pandemic has been crucial for the well-being of the security of Northerners. We've been able to assist residents of our communities more quickly and effectively with that support, but we know there's more to be done. We are hopeful the federal government remains one of our committed partners as we focus efforts on the development of strategic approaches to strengthen certainty in the territory. To fulfill our mandate to both grow and process food locally, food sovereignty is of particular importance to the territory's Indigenous populations. It would be beneficial to talk to those Indigenous governments directly. I'm not sure if there are plans in the works to do so, but please let us know and we can be of assistance to making those connections. We are already running and further developing programs to build capacity in territorial food production sectors. Programs training youth in traditional harvesting, agriculture, and fishing will ensure traditional practices are preserved and sustained. These actions will increase local purchase options at a lower cost for people throughout the NWT. It will in turn reduce the territory's reliance on national and international supply chains. We're not quite there. However, we do continue to work with our partners to monitor the resiliency of supply chains. The strengthening of local food sectors and increased access to traditionally harvested foods will be the key to making real and meaningful progress. This will also create jobs and strengthen the economy, which will contribute to a positive feedback loop, which will be important to achieving territorial food security. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Well, thank you very much. And as much as I complain about the technology, it's really amazing to think that we've gone from Nunavut to the Northwest Territories, and now we're going to the Yukon with our next witness, Mr. Pillay. Please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you to the members of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs for inviting me to speak today. I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Kwalin-Dun First Nation and the Taan-Wet'suwet'en Council. As Minister responsible for agriculture in Yukon, matters of food security are of significant importance to me and to Yukoners. I would like to set the stage by recalling a moment from several years ago. In June of 2012, heavy rains caused a series of mudslides and washouts along the Alaska Highway. severing Yukon's only road link to southern Canada. While the highway was only down for a few days, produce sections in Whitehorse supermarkets were diminished to just radishes and coconuts. Shelves became quickly bare across many of our communities, and it was at this moment that many Yukoners became truly familiarized with the term food security. Yukon is not unique when it comes to our fragile connection to food supply in the north, and I'm sure you have heard many similar stories and descriptions of this tenuous link from my northern counterparts and friends. With that, the important message I hope to convey to you today are twofold. First, that I'm very encouraged this topic is being heard by the committee today, which tells me that this is an important national concern. And second, which I will focus on the remainder of my remarks on, is that the Yukon is making incredible strides to address food security in a way that not only helps keep our shelves stocked, but also grows an important part of our local economy. This past summer, the government of Yukon launched Cultivating Our Future 2020 Yukon Agricultural Policy. This new policy will guide Yukon's agricultural industry over the next decade and increase the territory's ability to be more self-sufficient in food production. The vision of our new policy is to increase food self-sufficiency for Yukon, support production of high-quality products, contribute to our local economy, and leave positive cultural and environmental legacies for future generations. With easily disrupted southern supply chains and limited food production, our new policy seeks to decrease reliance on southern imports. This can be done by increasing local food production and consumption by supporting infrastructure development and Yukon-grown marketing initiatives. Yukon's agriculture and agri-food industry is a key part of our Yukon life and has been a growing part of our economy since the Klondike Gold Rush. While improvements in transportation have resulted in importing much of our food from the south, Yukon farms continue to fulfill the important role of providing fresh, healthy products to feed our communities while keeping transportation greenhouse gas emissions low relative to imported food. Over the last decade, the total amount of land under cultivation and the number of farms in Yukon has grown, along with livestock and vegetable production. According to the 2016 census agriculture released by the Government of Canada, between 2011 and 2016, the number of farms increased by just over 9%, with over 142 farms in the territory. In 2016, total farm investments included land, buildings, and equipment and livestock reported at just over $100 million. In addition, Yukon First Nations and communities are taking the lead in food security through various community garden projects. Community gardens are allowing people to participate in gardening and feeding their community members with fresh produce. First Nations are also leading food security through farming, education, and community development. The Tronagwichan First Nation, with their Working and Teaching Farm, won the Arctic Inspiration Prize for their work towards food security in 2019. Other Yukon First Nations, such as the Carcross-Tagish First Nation and the First Nation of Nechanai-Dun, have working farms that support their communities as well. Yukon farm operators specialize in a variety of products, including vegetables, livestock, fruit, dairy, eggs, honey, sod, and bedding plants. Yukon producers breed and raise a variety of livestock, including cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, horses, ponies, llamas, alpacas, rabbits, bison, and elk. Producers also breed and raise a variety of poultry for meat, chicks, and eggs. The territory's reliance on imported livestock is slowly decreasing as more Yukon producers are starting to breed their own animals and are committed to year-round operations. Yukoners are exploring different ways of extending the shelf life of their products and are producing a great variety and the amount of stored vegetables, cut meats, value-added products such as preserves and jams. These products are found in large retail stores, community markets, and in gourmet meals prepared by restaurants and caterers in Yukon's food service industry. In recent years, this growth in new products has expanded into new markets, and Yukon farmers are finding success in selling their products both within and outside our local region. Much of this incredible growth of Yukon's agricultural industry is due to the support of the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. Under this agreement, the Government of Canada commits to allocating $1.48 million to Yukon agriculture for each year for 5 years until 2023. This funding amount includes the Government of Canada's in-kind contributions as well. Many agricultural projects are eligible for over 60% funding, with the remainder coming from the individual farmer, meaning the $1.48 million per year can trigger a large investment in our farm community. The Canadian Agricultural Partnership supports our commitment to building a productive and profitable local agriculture industry and our ability to be more self-sufficient in food production. In the first 2 years of the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, over 315 projects have been supported to help develop agriculture in the Yukon. We are proud of our growing agriculture industry in Yukon, and we know that there is a long way to go in terms of increasing our food security. In order to increase food security for Yukon, we require collaboration and partnership with the Government of Canada, Yukon First Nation governments, municipal governments, and stakeholder organizations and individual producers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All of our presenters right on time, and hopefully that'll continue because we have a tremendous panel and a lot of questions to be asked, beginning with Mr. Viersen. Arnold, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here. I'm fascinated with the Yukon and the farming that's going on up there. It's spitting distance from where I'm from, and so I'm a little bit familiar with farming in the north. I just was wondering if the number of butcher shops in Yukon, is that a growing thing? Is that that seems like something that our First Nations communities would be have expertise in as well, given the living off the land. Is that because I notice in rural Alberta the number of butcher shops is decreasing? I'm just wondering in the Yukon where that's headed.
It's an absolutely exciting time. It's really a renaissance of the agricultural industry. It's what many of the folks online here today would have seen in their home provinces, 100 years ago. So we're actually seeing an increase in butcher shops and folks making a decision to maybe leave work in public service or in the private sector in other areas and going back and actually becoming trained to be able to open these. So our smaller communities like Dawson City, Mayo, some of the small communities now, we're seeing investment by the private sector to open these. We have a mobile abattoir, which we use in some of our rural areas. We've shared that information with other jurisdictions like Newfoundland, where it seems to be a good solution for some of this work. So, simply answer your question, we're seeing them open a couple almost each year, and we're using CAP funding for either infrastructure offset or training offset. And this year, to be very open with you, we had a very difficult time keeping up with the demand that we had. And that doesn't even take into consideration, as you alluded to, traditional foods. So during hunting seasons, there's still a big demand on a lot of those services, whether it be through, the many things that you can hunt in the Yukon and harvest. So we're going to see more of a push for even more of these operations to open.
Has there been like a specific policy change that you have brought in? I know that in northern Alberta, there's just a frustration on the behalf of many of the small butcher shops around the layers of red tape that are required to maintain their operations. Has the Yukon pursued a unique policy arrangement around butcher shops?
We're still early stage, so we're working through dealing with our own departments through environmental health, which is key. I think it's really just been more of an interest. We're seeing people pivot towards this opportunity, and at a federal level, the one thing we're really looking to is to continue to have the support at the federal level from CFIA, and others to make sure, because now we're kind of moving into this larger production, and we've had good support out of Northern British Columbia from representatives, and to date it's worked. But I think as we move on, we're going to need to have a presence in the Yukon from some of the federal representatives that are going to be able to help us when we have to be watching our operations on a pretty consistent basis to make sure that we're meeting the guidelines that are laid out.
Moving to the Northwest Territories, is the situation similar there? You're still muted.
You're still muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, there's always one person in the meeting that does that. My apologies. We work very closely with the Yukon government. Their agriculture sector is a bit more developed than ours. We do have commercial operators here. We've seen through COVID the movement of food actually into grocery stores, which has been a big step. our health department has done some reg changes that's allowed for that. And I mentioned in my opening comments that our government needs to do some work and is committed to doing work around meat regulations. So we want to, and we have been working with Yukon to find out what's working for them, so that when we embark on having locally processed meats, poultry, traditional foods done here, that we've got kind of a made in the north situation that works for us. But yes, it's on the radar, and definitely a key answer to our food insecurity issues. So thank you.
All right. And the Nunavut around meat production. I noticed when I was up there a few years back, the number of geese that fly through there is incredible. Is that something that's being used, and are you seeing this similar as the Yukon growth in butcher shops in Nunavut?
Thank you for the question. So Nunavut is probably a little bit different. Within Nunavut, there are three facilities, like meat or fish processing facilities, one in each region. But within Nunavut, if I could make the equivalent in terms of butchering, it would be the passing on of skills around how to once an animal has been caught. It would be the out on the land, knowing how to cut properly, knowing how to just the whole process of taking care of an animal once you've been caught. So it's the concerns in Nunavut are more the lack of community infrastructure for doing that. So places in a community where, once a catch has been brought back to the community, it can be prepared in the community, community freezers, the young hunter mentorship programs that would connect elders with youth in terms of learning how to prepare animals. There has one interesting project that has happened over the last years has been the development of a country food guideline. So this is a project that has looked at kind of combining some of the health guidelines with country food and making it easier to serve country food within government-run facilities like a hospital, for example. So
I'm sorry, we're at time. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. We need to go now to Mr. Van Couverden for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to listen to everybody's perspective today. It's wonderful of you to join us. Thank you. It's also just great, as I think has been pointed out already, that we're able to come together virtually because you are part of the northern region, but it's so vast, and the travel to come to here in Ottawa would be so challenging. So Kian Manak, Nakamik, Ms. Turner, Mr. Pillai, and Ms. St. Denis for joining us today. I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Algonquin here in West Block in Parliament. I love the North. I love to visit, and whenever I have the occasion to express gratitude to Inuit for the gift of the kayak, I do. I was a professional kayaker for 20 years, and I had the pleasure to visit the North and express that gratitude personally, but I never resist the temptation to express that again, so thank you. I've also had the opportunity to try and eat country foods like natik and matak, and for those who are on the call who are not familiar, that's seal and whale and narwhal. And it was quite an experience and delicious. As I mentioned, the diversity of the challenges and issues that people are facing in the various northern regions is vast. That diversity is important to recognize, so it's important that we don't try to paint the North with one brush, as been mentioned just now. My question is primarily for Ms. Turner, but if there is time left over, I would extend the same question to the others without coming back on, if that's possible to save time. I recently had the occasion to discuss the issue of northern food security with the founder of Community Food Centers of Canada, Nick Saul, and he said something that has stuck with me for a couple of days now, and it's kind of been corroborated somewhat by our witnesses today, but I'd really like your take on it. He basically said that the solution to hunger isn't actually food, because the cause of hunger is poverty, and just giving people food or a discount on it doesn't solve the problem of poverty, and that doesn't get to the root problem of hunger and food insecurity. I hear you that we've made some progress. I hear you that the investments being made now are making a difference, but I'd like to know from you and the others what this thesis of the solution to hunger not actually being food means to you in the context of the challenges that your communities face and where we might go from here. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. I would say that it's a bit circular. It's difficult to take steps forward in your life if you are hungry, if you don't have the nutrients and energy to even get up and concentrate. Absolutely, there are lots of struggles with poverty, with trauma in Nunavut, with mental health and addictions in Nunavut that make it difficult for people to kind of access skills or training and be successful in their community endeavors, employment. So absolutely, it contributes to it. However, and similarly, I would also say that there's very much a focus and concern on skill building. So again, that break that has happened, that has stopped the traditional knowledge of elders being passed down to younger generations in terms of how to get out and access their food, has been a big challenge. But the cost of like a skidoo and a chemotic and bullets and guns is a limiting factor. So it's a little bit circular in a sense, but you do need food to have the energy to take steps forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment or the thesis was a little bit philosophical and not exactly the most pragmatic thing. But thank you for that. Mr. Pillai, do you have any comments regarding?
Yeah, I think today what I really wanted to try to illustrate to the panel is when we think about our own food production, of course, and sort of that bigger conversation about climate change and taking into consideration what we could do here at a sort of Yukon domestic level. But I think that we as a government realize that there's definitely some key value in that point that you're making. I mean, we have a holistic approach on how we're dealing with a number of items, whether it's support for some of our most at risk and youngest, right through to the supports that we've put in to work hand in hand with our First Nation communities. And our First Nation communities are exceptional leaders. We've got 11 of our 14 First Nations in the Yukon are modern treaty, which makes up probably half of the self-governing First Nations almost in the country. And so with that, there's a lot of very independent strategies that they're putting in place to deal with this. So I think from our perspective, when I have my agriculture hat on, I think about how we make sure that we build this infrastructure and that we have these small communities where they're buying farms that were in place, and now the First Nations running those farms and their elders are there and they're getting to choose, the things they want to see grown for next year, and we're seeing that happen in each one of our communities. So I think at that place we're, helping. It's such a holistic approach. It's just a healthy way of living. They have access to the folks that are in those communities, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, have the access to that great food, and I think it helps, in all causes. And as Ms. Turner said, you have to have the fuel, and if anybody knows that, you do. So I think overall, there's definitely some substance there, and it comes with us having to, when we think about food security at a social level, making sure that our programs that are running in more of our urban area, which most of our population is, are identifying those needs as well. And in some cases, what we had happen this year was our food bank. We had local chefs using local produce with local recipes to feed our population at home here that had some challenges. So that's what we want to see happen versus shipping it in and then supporting our programs that way.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pillai. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mr. Van Couverton. And we go now to Madam Berube, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked about poverty a while ago. We know that food insecurity and poor nutrition disproportionately affects people, communities, houses in the North and Indigenous people. So in your opinion, what are the factors that contribute to food insecurity in your respective territories?
Hello, do we?
Est-ce que quelqu'un veut répondre à la question?
Shall I? I think it was a question to everyone, so I can start. Merci, Madame Bérubé.
Thank you, Madame Bérubé. About 80% of the population of Nunavut is made of Indigenous people, Inuit, and about 40% of the population receive social assistance, social welfare. So most of the people in Nunavut are affected by poverty. There are several factors that contribute to food insecurity, including past policies that led to trauma, mental health, challenges with addiction, but also the very high cost of accessing equipment to buy food, combined with knowledge and capacities for transferring knowledge from one generation to another. That will help how to access food, how to hunt, and so on. So these are the factors that apply in Nunavut.
Au niveau du territoire du Nord-Ouest?
Northwest Territory?
The question, but understanding from what Nunavut responded to, the Northwest Territories are in foods insecurity factors about 21%. For us, and just leading up to the last question, for us, it's about being, having sustainable, self-reliant options moving forward. Obviously, poverty and health and education all have links in there. But I don't know if there could be an opportunity just for a quick recap on the question. Once again, there was a bit of a technical glitch.
Je vais vous la répéter. Donc, on parlait...
I'll repeat it. A while ago, we talked about poverty, and that contributes to food insecurity, and which disproportionately affects Indigenous households in the North and communities. So what are the factors that contribute to food insecurity in your territory?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The challenges in the Northwest Territories, obviously, is the high percentage of food insecurity, as well as access to reasonably priced foods. So Nutrition North plays a role there. But our government's really focused on having programs and using programs like CAP to make sure that there's training and skills built in order for people to get out of poverty. And the solution needs to be a northern-based one. I think it would be important to actually get direct Indigenous government feedback, and that might be something that we can help facilitate. But that we know that really it's about how can we change the shift between, doing some investment in social economic development and getting people out of poverty. So we have our anti-poverty coalition is actually meeting in the new year, and I'll commit to providing a meeting summary to the committee as well. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. For the Yukon?
Keep it brief. As you can see from my colleagues, when we reflect on the status or situation or perspective from with our First Nation governments partners, we're very respectful in the sense of just ensuring that those nations are speaking with their own voices. So I think that, again, I would offer up the Council of Yukon First Nations is doing a lot of work right now to ensure that there are programs in place that are aligned with the Department of Education to ensure young individuals are starting the day off right and meeting some of the gaps that might be in place. I would just pivot to one spot. I would say that costs continue to grow. I mean, I see it. I think we all, anyone living here in the Yukon is experiencing it. What a bundle of goods looked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we're seeing it across the country. So I think that I think people will make the right choices collectively but cost is going to be a factor. We have one fly-in community, so we don't have the same challenges as my partners from Nunavut or Northwest Territories. But in that community, when you think about it, I mean, the one my colleague, Minister Frost, who's the Minister of Health, we always joke about is when you're thinking that a watermelon costs $30, if you can get one there. And I know my partners across the other territories would have stories that would make that seem minimal. So again, I believe it's cost. I think people will make the right decisions if those foods are available to them.
Thank you very much. And now we go for a 6-minute round with Rachel Blaney. Ms. Blaney, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all of our witnesses today for your interesting testimony. If I could start with you, Ms. Turner. You talked about 79% of children facing food security in your territory. And you then talked about the difference for you between food security and food sovereignty. Just wondering if you could explain what that means a little bit more.
Yes, so food sovereignty speaks to the ownership and control over food systems. So in Nunavut, if we think back to the traditional source of food, traditional way of life, Inuit had control over going out on the land and getting their own food. Today, because of the levels of poverty, because of the multiple factors that are limiting access both to get out on the land and the settlement into communities, there's a lot more store-bought food, but that is private companies that are shipping up the food to communities. So there's little that shift in terms of food security. You have enough food to eat versus having control over what food is available to you and how you access and having that choice. And then food sovereignty would also be, in terms of the point about children, it would be the capacity to pass that skill and control to the younger generations.
Thank you. That's really helpful. You also talked about the fragility of accessing country food, and that, of course, the challenges are multiple. I'm just wondering if you could talk about what are the issues that cause this fragility, and what steps do you think would be helpful in ending the fragility?
Thank you. So some of the factors that have contributed to the fragility is the broken transmission of the knowledge of on the land knowledge. That is huge, and it can't be underestimated. There are other examples, for example, the sled dog killings, which completely took away the tools that Inuit had to go out on the land. Today, with time changing, there's much more use of skidoos and ATVs, but obviously this is expensive equipment. So some of the challenges is being able to afford that equipment. Some of the challenges are also even having access to the equipment, or the replacement parts when your skidoo breaks down, how to fix it so you can get out on the land. Climate change is obviously huge. Hunters are having to go further and further away from communities to reach the animals that they're hunting. So those are some of the factors. There has been some good progress in the last few years with the creation of the Harvester Support Program through the Nunavut Food Security Coalition, the Nutrition North Canada program. And the other big investment that is needed on a larger scale are young hunter mentorship programs. There's a couple of really beautiful programs, and to see the joy in kids' faces when they catch their first catch, it's such a valuable community celebration. So there's a number of strong programs across the territory, and just the need to support those programs and create them in the communities where they're not as strong, so that we can get kids out on the land.
So that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask about next. You talked about federal funding and some of the challenges that you're seeing in your region around how those funding sources are designed, and some of the particular barriers. You even mentioned access to internet as one of those barriers. Could you just talk a little bit about what those barriers are and what kind of design changes would be helpful for communities in your region?
So a lot of federal applications are shifting more and more to internet-based applications, computer-based applications. So if you combine that with, I don't have the statistics, but bandwidth is very limited, and then the vast majority of the population don't have access to a phone, don't have access to internet. So and you combine that with a culture that is written is not really part of the traditional Inuit culture. It's more of a storytelling culture, a spoken culture. So even the barrier of kind of taking the time to write down in your second language your project idea is difficult. So as well as the just some of the criteria in terms of the federal application is often just makes it impossible for communities to, they don't end up being eligible. So those are some of the factors that make it very difficult for communities to apply. It's also short deadlines for turnarounds for applying for projects, as well as community exhaustion, that they have to send out so many different applications to get bits and pieces of funding to be able to get enough funding to actually meet the high costs here in Nunavut. So
thank you very much. Thanks. I'm going to ask the committee now. We have time issues, of course. So my suggestion as chair is that we do as we did the previous round, have each of the parties speak for their allotted second round time, 5 minutes for the Conservative, Liberal, and 2.5 for the Bloc and NDP. And then if we approve of that, because we need to have your approval to go past 1 o'clock, are the witnesses available to stay with us for a few more minutes after? Thumbs up from the witnesses. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. So
Chair, just a quick point of order. Obviously, when we agree to go late, sometimes colleagues have to go to other meetings. So, of course, there would be no motions or others entertained. I just want to clarify that before we agree to continue past the deadline.
Oh, you caught me. No, we're not going to do that. And thanks. It's a very good point, and I appreciate that. So we'll continue as stated, and Eric Melillo will be next with 5 minutes. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to pose this question to each of our three witnesses, and I thank them for being here with us today. And a lot of what we've heard today, and what we know, is that food security is a very complex issue. There are many aspects that have to go into it, including transportation and infrastructure. And of course, in the north, we have many infrastructure gaps and transportation difficulties. And I truly believe that the government can and should do much more to help fill some of those gaps. So perhaps following the lead of my colleague, Mr. Viersen, I'll start in the west with the Yukon, and we can work our way east from there. And I'd like to just have comments from each of our witnesses on how those transportation infrastructure difficulties play a role in the prevalence of food insecurity, and what the federal government can do to help address that.
Thank you. I think speaking about our current situation, some of the concern that we would have at this particular time is what happens to regional airlines. We know the pressure that we're in across the country. We know that we have a couple of major airlines that support the travel internationally and across this country, but probably most of us online here would have a regional airline that plays an important role for us. you know, we know that the bigger airlines, WestJet or an Air Canada, is not going to fly to Dawson City or Old Crow every 2 days to fill the need that our regional airlines hold. So I think I would just say that it's very important for us to continue to support these folks across the country, and I'm sure it would be the same in NWT, Quebec, Labrador, you name it. So Nunavut. When it comes to our road access, we have about 5,000 kilometers of all-season roads, and of course, for those on the line, you can imagine if it's not being shipped or flown into Alaska, it's coming through Whitehorse. I mean, the Alaska Highway has been a major artery to connect our continent and our countries for a long time. So I think from that perspective, there's good infrastructure in place, and it costs a lot to maintain those roads. And we've had an agreement with the United States for a number of years, and that's come to an end, and that really maintains the Alaska Highway. And there was a transfer that was put in place from the U.S. to Canada to do that work, and it inevitably landed in the financial framework of the Yukon government. And we would deploy that. So I think getting that back in place is going to be key, because that highway has always been that's our central artery. I think the third would be, as we think about innovation and we move forward, if we look at the conversation we're having across the country, we are really going to need to figure out for long haul trucking how we can expedite the process of them pivoting towards different fuel sources. Our number one form of emissions is heating, and our second is transportation. So for us, that's really the sweet spot to look at if we want to reduce emissions. And we just rolled out a new climate change plan for the next 10 years, and we're going to have to figure that out. So I would say that if there's anywhere to help, it's going to be, how do we make sure that all those trucks coming out of Alberta, which basically a lot of our product is all coming out of Edmonton, how do we make sure that those trucks, those business owners can make the decisions to use a different type of innovative machine to get something up the highway, and how are they going to be able to make those decisions because of the extraordinary capital costs on the front end of making those decisions. But that's what we need to be able to do if we're going to change a bit of how we do this in a healthier way, because inevitably it's going to take us a while to be able to do the growth we want, and we are going to still be purchasing from across the country and the United States as we do now.
About a minute left.
Yeah, I'd like the opportunity for the other witnesses to comment on that with the limited time available.
Someone, Tracy?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Minister Palau's comments about supporting our regional airlines. We are obviously very jealous of the Yukon Territory's road systems. A majority of our communities are fly-ins, so that would actually be a critical continued support for us for regional airlines. And as well, with the impacts of climate change, we actually as well have a climate change strategy, and keeping an eye on that. There will be obviously continued impacts on our road systems, our limited road systems. And I just wanted to flag that, I mentioned the Anti-Poverty Coalition meeting next month. And really for us, it's understanding how our Indigenous governments, what they're seeing as priorities for food security moving forward. So look forward to sharing that information with our federal colleagues so that we can work together. Thank you.
Very briefly, Lindsay?
For Nunavut, I would say it's all 25 fly-in communities. So a lot of the discussion is around airport infrastructure. So runways, a lot of them are gravel runways or short runways, as well as building small craft harbors or deep sea ports.
And thank you all. Yvonne Jones, it's your round now for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to fix my second. Here we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank the panelists this morning, Ms. Turner, Ms. Centenay, Minister Palau. It's really good to see you all on the line and hear your presentations this morning. So there's so many questions I could ask, and I know we have limited time. Obviously, we've seen some transformable changes around Nutrition North Canada and food security over the last few years in terms of increased federal supports, whether it's in agri-food investments, emergency food funds, increases to the Nutrition North subsidy, and so on, and expanding the program, expanding the communities. One debate continues. I'd like to get your view on this. Right now, Nutrition North Canada really provides a subsidy to wholesale companies. There's always an argument around whether that should be going to the wholesalers or to the airlines. I'd like to get your feedback on that. And the other question I guess I have is for Ms. Turner, so I'll throw it out there and hopefully there's enough time. You know, Nunavut are impacted much greater when it comes to food insecurity in Canada than other populations. In the last survey, it showed 57%. Is there culturally prospective programs that you see that could be launched in Nunavut to help us alleviate some of that difficulty that families are having that is probably not being done right now? And I'll leave my questions right there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Lindsay, do you want to start with that and then we'll go to the subsidy question? Go ahead.
So I would say the investments in harvester support programs are key. And then two other areas would be more specifically young hunter mentorship programs. And then lastly, I think another key area is the capacity building of the not-for-profit sector. So funding for each community to have a space to run community food programs and to hire staff to run them consistently. In terms of Nutrition North program, there remains a lot of a lack of trust in Nunavut around the transparency of the program. So it's difficult to say whether shifting the subsidy to the airlines would change that. There's definitely an interest in seeing. Some changes have been welcome, so the harvester support program and some of these hyper subsidies have made a difference, but other kind of program changes are still being called for. So more transparency, a different focus on food being shipped, but actually food being consumed, as well as looking at the program objectives. The program objectives should be food security rather than access the shipping of food.
Tracy, do you want to comment on the subsidy?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that, there's been a lot of investment on growing food, and we've seen some success even in our high Arctic communities on growing root vegetables. I think the big challenge for us moving forward is that storage, those storage options. Some of them were alluded to earlier. So that's going to be a priority for us. Around Nutrition North, we've got great partnerships with agriculture, with AFC to grow food. We've got local producers that are growing, but unfortunately they're competing at the same time with that subsidized food that's coming in through Nutrition North. So that's something that we're going to continue some dialogues on. And part of that is us doing some of our own homework around the development of a food security plan. But it really is about, creating opportunities and having less imported food coming into our territory. So developing our commercial operators. Thank you.
Mr. Pillay? Subsidy question?
Yeah, I think that we're happy to see the focus on the improvements. For us, again, it becomes our Old Crow, which is essentially our Canada's most northwestern community. I think there's some room to move. I would have to take a better look, MP Jones, to really see what would happen with that subsidy switch moving over to the private sector. So I don't think I'm prepared to give you an analysis on that today. But overall, I think it's important to just keep working with the communities and to understand that this is a real impediment for them to be able to access food, especially in these flying communities.
Thanks very much. That brings us within 8 seconds. So thanks for the responses. Now for 2.5 minutes, Madame Bérubé, please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question goes to Madame Turner. We know that an evaluation of the Nutrition North program was done last year, and food insecurity has worsened in Nunavut since it was introduced. The study also comes up with serious concerns concerning the fact that the federal government continue resorting to grants to resolve the food problem in the North. How do we explain the increase in the food insecurity situation in the North following the introduction of the Nutrition North program in Canada? Thank you. I would say that the problem has to do with the program objective. The objective is to reduce prices. When you combine that with a level of poverty, prices drop, but it's still not affordable for most families for them to be able to buy food. So it's a combination of these factors. When we also talk about food insecurity, this concerns poverty. We also know that it also has to do with mental health. With the pandemic we've gone through, could you tell us the current situation in Nunavut? Recently, Nunavut had its first case, and we've seen to what extent food insecurity was critical. If you are infected with the virus, you don't have food, it causes more problems. Lots of investments were made in Nunavut in food insecurity, so it was possible to see lots of programs introduced. There were food hampers used, but the concern is that that level of funding will not be there in the coming years. There's something else that is critical: the capacity of the communities to organize programs and to deliver those programs. Maybe the last idea I would like to share is that with isolation and cancellation of some programs, there's been a real impact, because sometimes people go to find food by participating in programs in school or in programs in communities. But when those programs come to an end, there's a higher risk for food insecurity when it comes to food. Thank you.
And finally, Ms. Blaney, please go ahead for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So if I could start with Ms. Turner and then Ms. St. Dennis, if you could respond. Both of you talked about mentorship programs for harvesting and for country food. I'm just wondering if you could talk about those programs and if there's any particular barriers that limits the capacity of your region to have them. Ms. Turner, if I could start with you.
I think the barriers would be the more obvious barriers would be the sustained funding to be able to get out on the land consistently for long periods of time, and having the capacity within communities, that not-for-profit sector capacity, for example, to organize and manage the programs on a consistent basis. So they're not just offered every now and then, but they're offered all the time.
St. Dennis, thank you.
Thank you. We actually have a few mentorship programs. We have a Ticket Kid gardening program, which is funded through the CAP program with Agriculture Canada. We've recently announced an on the land program, which will include mentorship harvesting. So I would echo that it's not only funding capacity, but just even the capacity of our own government. We're a small government. I think we punch above our weight, but it's really about, I think our teams have done a good job coming up with this program, and love to report in once we have everything rolling out, but always looking for additional resources. Thank you.
You got another minute.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. Turner, if I could just end with the last question to you, which is just around the country food guidelines. I just thought that was interesting and find that compelling. We did a study in last Parliament around elders' facilities on reserve, and the access to traditional food was one of the biggest barriers. So if you could just talk about how that works and how you're able to get that food into these care facilities.
So this is a project that's run through our Department of Health. So I don't have 100% of the details, but part of what the guidelines did was that it kind of went into some of the biological information around the different foodborne illnesses and how you can how to store the food, like if you're preparing the food, at what temperatures it needs to be stored, that type of information. So it goes through a number of different species and different animals, and how to store them, as well as some of the kind of the preparation techniques. And it talks also about serving the food. Traditionally, Inuit their preference would be to eat the food as fresh as possible as soon as they cut the animal out on the land. So it kind of looks at both eating the food raw as well as cooking the food. There was a pilot project that was run at the hospital here in Iqaluit that I'm aware of, and I could find some information and send it to the committee on the results from that project.
That would be great if you could do that. And thank you very much. And thank you to another wonderful panel in a very serious, important subject. And we're honored to have a responsibility as the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee to listen, to reflect, and to recommend. And so we will do that. Just in closing, because I was eager to get this in, as we were discussing earlier, the opportunities of growing food in the North. The old guy with the hat driving the last spike was Lord Strathcona. As a young man, he managed the Hudson's Bay Post and Hamilton Inlet, and it was his pride and pleasure to make a garden. Using fish fertilizer, he succeeded in Hamilton Inlet in growing almost every kind of vegetable and even ripened melons and other fruit under glass. An American visitor said the best cauliflower he ever tasted was in Lord Strathcona's garden. I don't know if there's any value in that for today's discussion, but I had to get it in. Thank you so much, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.